The political process is important, and we see the development of democratic institutions in Yemen, the only republic in the Arabian Peninsula, as an important development, not only for Yemen, but also more broadly for the region and the international community. But we also recognize that the political process is not an end in itself, but is in fact only a means of arranging a context, a framework, to address the issues that are, in fact, the greatest challenges that Yemen confronts. And those are, I think, pretty clearly economic issues. And how do we help address the multiple problems of poverty, of a very negative demographic environment in terms of health and education, and also, of course, very high levels of unemployment and lack of jobs and opportunities for young Yemenis going into the future. And so, at the same time that we're working very hard on addressing the political issues, we are also trying to engage with the government and with Yemeni society on how we can move together in order to address some of these very difficult and sustained economic challenges. The most important thing, I think, from our perspective, is really creating an environment that favors the strengthening of the private sector and promoting private investment in the Yemeni economy. And it will come as no surprise to many of the people in the audience today. There is a strong private sector in Yemen. It's vibrant. It is entrepreneurial. But up until now, it really has been stymied by the obstacles that have been created by many years of economic management or mismanagement and the other challenges. And so one of the things that we're really focused on is opening up the economy for greater private sector participation and really to see the private sector in Yemen, both domestic and foreign, become the engine for economic growth, for job creation, and for developing a prosperous future for Yemen. Let me just say at this point that you'll see in a lot of the analysis on the situation in Yemen, a lot of discussion about how dire the Yemeni situation is, how hopeless the circumstances are. Oil revenue is declining. There's not very much out there that can act as a substitute for oil, and therefore the country has no economic prospect and no economic future. I think that is a fundamentally flawed analysis. I think that there is a great deal in Yemen that we can use to build actually quite a strong economic future for the country. Certainly in terms of resources, agriculture, fisheries, the development of the port at Aden, and the Aden economic zone that the government is working on now, and a number of other initiatives that actually could be a very positive foundation for economic growth going into the future if we can address some of these obstacles and overcome some of the challenges that we face. The United States, in addition to the dialogue that we've had with the government and with the private sector about some of these initiatives and some of the things that we can do to help create an appropriate environment and help develop the infrastructure, the United States has also been a strong supporter of an initiative that the government of Yemen took in 2009, which is the development of a 10-point plan to move Yemen's economy in the right direction. We have supported that since it was published. We have continued to encourage the government to begin the implementation. We don't see the 10-point plan as a solution to Yemen's economic problems. It's not. But what it is a clear signal as the government moves forward to implement those points. It would be a strong signal to both the private sector in Yemen plus the potential foreign investors that the government is committed to economic reform and committed to moving the economy in the right direction. The United States has also been a strong supporter of the implementation of the various elements of the IMF agreement that were signed between the government of Yemen and the IMF in 2009. The record so far between the IMF and the government has been mixed. The Yemenis have undertaken a number of steps, but they haven't fulfilled the commitments that they made to reduce fuel subsidies, and they also have not taken the steps that they committed to in implementing a general sales tax to improve government revenues. These are important steps, and again would be seen, I think, pretty clearly by the private sector and by the international community as a signal of a government commitment to economic development. The United States has also supported a multi-donor trust fund. In fact, we've led the discussion, and we have a team in Sana'a as we speak that's meeting with government of Yemen officials as well as with potential partners that we hope will finalize the arrangements for the trust fund. If it works out well, we hope very much to be able to announce the implementation of the fund in Riyadh in March when the Friends of Yemen meet. We're waiting for the government of Yemen to identify what areas it wants to focus on, how it wants to use the funds that will be available through this fund, which will be managed by the World Bank. And what we anticipate is about $750 million over 5 years to promote economic development, hopefully to focus in on a sector or a couple of sectors where that kind of money can make a big difference. So we're working on all of these things. Now, fundamentally, of course, the United States alone can't take on all of these challenges by itself. It can't be the only partner, and so we're also looking to the international community to be partners with us. I think that we've had positive indications. Saudi Arabia and the GCC have been very strongly committed to working with Yemen over these past few years. They continue to be good partners for the government of Yemen, both on the political and the economic side. On the economic side, they are by far the largest international donors to Yemen. The Saudi annual contribution to Yemen itself runs in the $1 to $2 billion a year range, making it by far the largest single donor. The other GCC states, the UAE, Oman, others, have also been major contributors to economic development. The state of Qatar has been extremely active on the political side and trying to mediate between the government and the Houthis in the north to try to resolve those issues. As of the time that I left Yemen about a week ago, in fact, there was some reason for optimism that the Qatari mediation was making progress, and that in fact we might see a breakthrough in the coming months. And then finally, the Friends of Yemen, which is an organization of about 22 or 23 different governments and states, have been very much involved in trying to promote the progress in developing a framework for how Yemen may address some of these very difficult challenges that it confronts, and that will continue. We are due to have a Friends of Yemen meeting sponsored by the Saudis in Riyadh probably in the middle of March. So to wrap up, the key point, I think, is that from a U.S. perspective, we see the development of a U.S.-Yemeni partnership into the future as what is going to be a key element of our regional strategy for many years to come. Yemen is a linchpin for regional security and stability, either for the good or for the bad. And therefore, it's important for the United States to help promote a positive security and stability environment for Yemen. And the impact that Yemeni security has reaches not only north into the Arabian Peninsula and Saudi Arabia, but also to the west, to the Horn of Africa and East Africa. So in many ways, Yemen is a linchpin for regional security and stability. The vision that we have is a secure, stable, and prosperous Yemen that will be integrated with the GCC. Although Yemen itself is not a member state of the GCC, it does participate in a number of the specialized agencies of the GCC. And each year, the number of agencies that it's part of increases. We would like to see that continue. And also, of course, to see a Yemen that's oriented towards the United States and towards the West going into the future. So these are some of the key elements of what we're trying to accomplish. The Secretary's visit was a very important step in that direction. As you may know, we invited President Saleh to visit the United States as part of the Secretary's visit there. We anticipate that visit will come a little bit later this year, and we look forward to using that visit as an opportunity to continue the discussions with President Obama and the other senior members of the administration, and to hopefully further cement the new era of partnership and cooperation between the two countries. And with that, I'll stop.
If the ambassador is willing, we can take some questions. By the way, I forgot to thank our sponsor for lunch, Michelle Reeves, and her organization in the College of Engineering, which very kindly sponsored.
My name is Munir Mawari. I am an independent journalist, Yemeni American, and political analyst based in Washington, D.C. I thank Wednesday for having you and us here. And I have two short questions and a comment. The first question is, you served in Pakistan, and now you have been 4 months in Yemen. Did you find any similarities or differences in both countries? The second one is about your visit here. You mentioned that Hillary Clinton's visit to Yemen is important in history. And we believe that your visit to the Yemeni community to Michigan and New York is historic also. It is the first visit of its kind ever in history. And we need to know who came up with this good idea. Is it you, Secretary Clinton, or the Yemeni community?
I'm going to take credit for any good idea.
Regarding your visit, what is the main message you want to convey to the Yemeni community? Also, I mean, as you mentioned, you are trying to have a good relation, not with the government, but also with the people. But as you might know, the relationship between the Yemeni government and the Yemeni people, including the opposition, is not perfect. And the balance between these two is very hard. If you just keep talking to the government, you're going to upset the people. And if you talk to the people directly, you're going to upset the government. How to keep balance in these kind of issues?
Okay.
Thanks.
Those are quite a few questions. Let me try to answer them as best I can. First of all, in terms of Pakistan and Yemen, I was doing a radio program this morning They asked about a new, of course the new question is, how does Yemen compare to Tunisia? And last summer there was an article in the New York Times about how does Yemen compare to Afghanistan. The fact of the matter is, of course, Yemen faces many of the same challenges that these other societies do, economic challenges, particularly in terms of poverty, of jobs, of some of these other issues. You also have an issue of violent extremism in these societies. So you can look and say, well, in this area or in that area, there are similarities. But I think that it's also important that you recognize that there are significant differences and that you never can draw a complete analogy between the history or the culture or the experience of any two societies. Each one is always going to be unique. Each one is always going to be a little bit different. I think that in some ways, you look at Pakistan and Yemen, you see that there are some areas where perhaps Pakistan has an advantage. I think it's a little bit wealthier in natural resources. It's got a much larger population, a much larger educated population. So it has certain advantages. On the other hand, Yemen has advantages. I think the history of Yemen and the identity of the Yemeni people as Yemenis is an important advantage for them. It's one big difference I've seen since I came there is that I think that Yemenis are much more likely to identify themselves and to identify themselves with their history and their culture than perhaps Pakistanis are. So you need to be careful about trying to draw comparisons or analogies. Each society will pursue its own path. I'm glad that you mentioned the issue about the outreach. I'm a little bit surprised that it really is the first time that we've done something like this. But like I said, I'll take credit for it anyway. The idea is, as we've discussed today, that we have a large Yemeni American community here in the United States that is, in fact, a great resource for both of our societies. It's a group of people who can speak authoritatively and have their personal experience living in both places, understanding both, speaking both languages, and that really they can be a bridge between our two countries. And as we go forward and as we talk about pursuing some of these ideas that we discussed earlier, the partnership between our two countries, one thing that we really need to do is to be much more effective than we've been in the past at trying to reach out to the Yemeni people themselves. One of the experiences that I've had, like I said, I haven't seen anti-Americanism in Yemen. What I've seen is that most Yemenis really are very unfamiliar with the United States. We haven't been a factor there. We haven't been present in Yemen in any significant way. And when we do come in, we have a tendency of only meeting with the senior leadership and not trying to reach out. And so as we go forward, I think that one of our challenges and one of our objectives is really to be much more effective at communicating directly with the Yemeni people and explaining what our policies are, having Yemenis come to the United States and experiencing what this country is about at first hand and understanding us a little bit better that way, but also having more people come from the United States to Yemen to talk a little bit about the United States and about the American experience for the Yemeni people. And there's no better audience, there's no better population to do that than the Yemeni American population. And so one of the things that I'll be trying to do today and tomorrow, if the weather permits, we'll be going to New York to have similar conversations with the Yemeni American community there. And that is, how can they be ambassadors for the United States to Yemen? How can they be part of our outreach program? Okay.
The second